How do you keep intruders out of a castle made of cheese?
I don't know.
A mozzarella.
A mozzarella. Holy dad joke.
Hungry Squared, bringing you the best food talk anywhere.
Welcome to the Hungry Squared podcast where the brain and belly meet. I'm Sharon from the Wasatch Cooking Guide.
And I'm Winter from theredparty.com. This week, we are talking about mindful eating with Jenny Eden Berk of Jenny Eden Coaching. We're really excited to chat with her. Let's talk about it.
Hungry Squared, yeah, Hungry Squared.
Winter, how's your week?
Oh, it's been good. How has your week been?
Pretty good.
Yeah?
Back from the honeymoon. Then we got norovirus.
Which is not awesome, everybody. I just want to point that out. That's gross.
Could be foreshadowing that we saw a new segment when Winter and I were getting pedicures for my wedding.
Yeah.
About norovirus, and we were talking about it. I was like, what in the heck?
It's so yuck, sad.
Total foreshadowing.
It's actually been it's not been great in Utah. It's been going around.
It has. And if it's at your house, I'm very sorry.
Yep. So for our food nerd shout out for the week, everybody, thanks for listening into our episode last week about the Ergo Spout, where I interviewed Kate and Bryce Hansen, the inventors of the Ergo Spout. You were not on that interview.
And I'm sad that I wasn't, because I've bought 2 Ergo Spouts and a fly trap, and I think it's marvelous.
I know. I'm pretty excited. We were all very excited about it. But I posted something about that this week, and one of our listeners, she posted, this is for Jess. Hey, Jess, how's it going? And she said, I'm such a mason jar nerd that this makes me incredibly happy.
Right?
Yeah. And I asked her if she had any vintage jars herself, because I think vintage jars are really pretty. I didn't realize
gorgeous.
how beautiful they were. And she's like, I hadn't seen those, but she's like, I do have some fun colored ones from Target. And that works too. So thanks, Jess, for hanging out with us on Facebook. We really appreciate it. And if you want to hang out with us on Facebook, just go to Hungry Squared or on Instagram, all of that good stuff. So thanks, Jess. Okay, let's dig into the kitchen drawer.
I don't know. Mine always clatters. That sounded like static, though.
Mine always clatters too, actually, because I got a lot of stuff in there.
Mm-hmm.
So mine doesn't, the thing that I'm talking about today, Sharon, does not fit into a kitchen drawer.
It could if you had those really cool, like, instead of cabinets on the under the counter.
Yes.
They do really big, deep drawers.
Yep.
We had some in our kitchen in Louisiana. They were awesome, and that's where we kept like all of our pots and pans and stuff like that.
You know, that would be nice for easy accessibility. That might have to be another kitchen design discussion at some point in time, drawers and cabinets. So the thing that I am talking about today, and I have talked about it before on the podcast, actually several times, but I have never talked about it in full. I'm going to give it some star ratings.
Oh, dang.
This is the Hamilton Beach sous vide and 6-quart slow cooker. Now, I've talked about my sous vide machine before, and I think a lot of people think that I have the stick sous vide.
Right, the water temperature circulator.
Now, that is, as we talked on the episode with Jason Logsden about sous vide, there are several types of sous vide machines, and if you don't know what a sous vide is, go listen to that episode. In a nutshell, it is a precision cooker. It keeps your water at a specific temperature at which you will cook your food, and you
cook your food in a plastic bag in a water bath.
Yep.
That sounds super weird. It's super good.
But the food is super good. I'm just saying. So I actually have a Hamilton Beach water bath type of a sous vide. So you just put water in there, turn it on to the temperature that you want, and let it go. And that's fine. The ones that are stick ones that you kind of attach to whatever pot you have or container you have. So that's a little bit more compact. I'll just say that right now. But this week I posted on my Facebook, I wanted to know what people owned. So I asked them if they owned a slow cooker, an Instant Pot, and a sous vide. And I was surprised at how many people, like almost everybody, had a slow cooker.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure.
Yep.
I'd say about half of the people had Instant Pots. And then I'd say maybe a fourth of the people had a sous vide or even knew what one was. Because there were so many people who were like, I don't know what that is even. So I really like this particular version of a sous vide because it is also a slow cooker. So if you think about it, it just kind of looks like a slow cooker, but you can have precision low temperatures for the sous vide portion. So I love it as a sous vide machine. I love it as a slow cooker. The only thing that I have qualms about, and I do have a qualm about this.
What? This is the first time I'm hearing that.
Yes, is that the lid just lays on the top of the lip of the basin portion.
Mm-hmm.
And
it doesn't clamp down.
It doesn't clamp down because you know how some slow cookers have...
Ours have clamps.
Yeah, they have clamps.
So you can travel with it.
Exactly. You cannot do that. Ours just kind of sits on it. And the lip around the edge of the bowl part is really shallow. And so it actually can slip off really easily. Now, I think actually that was a design thing for the sous vide in particular because... I mean, you're not boiling water or anything like that. You're not getting at temperatures that high by any means. But it just sits there so that if there's condensation, I think it can just kind of stay there and it can come out if need. I'm not totally sure why they did it that way.
Yeah, it's more of a design feature for the sous vide than it is for the slow cooker.
Exactly. So we've never traveled, like you said. It's nice to be able to travel with your slow cooker, I think.
Yeah.
Because if you're like, oh, I've got this really awesome dip that I'm going to keep in the slow cooker, but it's really hard to travel with.
Lucy could just hold it on her lap.
Or burn herself. Something like that. So that's my only qualm. Other than that, I think it works really well as a sous vide. I think it works really well as a slow cooker. But if you are planning on traveling with it, then you're going to have to jimmy rig it somehow. And I don't know how to jimmy rig it.
Duct tape.
Yeah, probably. It probably would have to be duct tape or something because that lid is really...
It's slippy. It's a little slippy.
Just because it's so shallow. That lip is really shallow. But I do love it. So I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5.
Okay.
But if I'm just using it at home, I would give it a 5 out of 5. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Totally
if you're
works.
Not taking it anywhere.
If I'm not taking it anywhere, it's a 5 out of 5 because it takes 2 of my appliances that I really like and puts them into one machine. And it is a sous vide.
Yeah.
And that's the way we cook. That is really a nice feature. So a 4 out of 5 and or a 5 out of 5. That's my rating.
Okay. So it's not like your popcorn popper.
No.
That apparently Lee hates and you've never known.
I've never known that before. I was shocked. I was like, oh, well.
I could hear it in your voice. Like, why do we even keep this thing?
I know. I was a little surprised. I'm not sure why I haven't tossed it out yet. Actually, I'll probably go put it in my donate to the DI pile. So
yeah.
Oh, if you don't know what DI is, that's our local
Goodwill.
So okay, 4 out of 5 / 5 out of 5.
And now for the main course.
Excited because we're here with Jenny Eden Berk. So she is a certified food coach, food psychology coach, and we're going to be talking about food hangups today
and mindful eating.
Mindful eating tips that you can take away because we talk about sweets, we talk about cool, interesting food on our show, but we don't talk about how that affects us. And so I think that Jenny's going to enlighten us and she's got a lot of great things to say about that.
Yeah, enjoy the interview.
In a culture obsessed with food and the ideal body image, Jenny offers men and women the chance to experience body love, pleasure with food again, greater self-esteem, and total acceptance of self. Her work focuses on healing our often fraught relationship with our bodies and with tuning into intrinsic wisdom to learn how to nourish ourselves naturally and joyfully. Jenny's own journey of body blame and food fear led her on a path of healing that inspired her to write her best-selling book, The Body Image Blueprint. She earned her master's in psychology and education from the University of Pennsylvania and later went on to receive her certificate in eating psychology and coaching and mindful eating. She resides in Boston with her husband, 3 spirited daughters, and 2 kittens.
Jenny, welcome. Thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
So, a little bit more about yourself. Can you tell us? So, you are an eating psychology coach, is what you call yourself, I think. Can you tell us a little bit about your story and why you decided to pursue this particular career path?
Yeah, I mean, my story starts early because I grew up in a household where my mom was a gourmet chef. And so the kinds of after school snacks that I got were sort of off the hook. It was not just like apples and peanut butter, which is great too, but my mom like made pastries in the shape of a swan and it was swimming in a pool of
Whoa.
ganache. Like, so I got the message very early on that food is love and food is, connection. But sadly, I also got the message that you can love food, but just don't love it too much because if you do, you'll gain weight, you'll be unhealthy. There was a lot of like fear around loving food too much. And it led to me sort of not trusting my appetite and sort of judging my who I was as an eater. So I got a lot of mixed messages and I grew up in a very like loving household, but I was also very influenced by my peers and by dieting culture. And I ended up just really being a chronic dieter for most of my life. And I worked after I got my master's. I worked at a national health and weight management company for 13 years, working with people primarily in obesity treatment, so helping people lose weight and get healthy. However, it was a very like aggressive weight loss protocol with meal replacements and processed kind of like not they weren't whole foods. They were like prepackaged meals and shakes with artificial sweeteners. And I felt very scrutinized there because I had always struggled with my weight. And here I was in front of large groups of people helping them to lose weight. And at the time I had gotten married, I had 3 children. So they were watching me firsthand, like gain weight, lose weight, gain weight. And I started to realize like that, excuse me, with people, it wasn't just the weight loss. In fact, it was so much more than just weight loss. And we weren't addressing that. We weren't addressing the root cause of why people felt called to overeat or to binge eat or to stress eat and like what was going on in our culture that was creating such havoc, us not trusting our bodies, us not agreeing to be in our bodies, even desperately wanting to change our bodies and to do it in like by all means possible. And I started to realize like that really wasn't for me. Not only did I not want to subscribe to that myself anymore, but I didn't think it was really super healthy for other people. I didn't feel like I was truly helping people. So that's what sort of inspired me to get my certificate in eating psychology because I wanted to get to the root cause of it. And also in that process, I actually healed my own relationship with food and I stopped dieting. I like threw away my scale and I started to adopt mindful and intuitive eating practices. That is the backbone of what I do now for other people, as well as body image concerns, mindfulness techniques, stress reduction techniques. And as I was learning about it, I just realized how passionate I am about this. And so it inspired me to write my book and to be a blogger. And, I've never been happier. It's been 3 years now.
That's wonderful. Now, when you say that your mom was she was basically a professionally trained chef and she would have all these wonderful after school treats, like you said, or I'm sure your meals were wonderful. Did you feel any of that pressure from your family also of the weird different habits of eating, or was it mostly from peers and kind of outside culture, the diet culture that we are definitely bombarded with?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's hard to say. I can tell you that there was never anything blatant in my own house. I think it had more to do, and I want to just preface by saying, like, I had and have a wonderful relationship with both my parents. It was very like easy, very loving. However, my mom also got swept up in dieting trends, and even though she's a very petite woman, she, children are very observant, and
Yes.
when you're a child, you sort of don't even have to say anything out loud to get certain messages. So I got the message loud and clear. I think it was because my mom was always on a diet. I think maybe because I noticed her looking in the mirror or maybe even saying comments about herself that kind of really went into my psyche. It kind of like became almost indoctrinated into me that a smaller body meant a more successful life or more love or more admiration or something. I just knew that this was something I needed to do. I needed to work on being in a smaller body. And I think it was the confluence of both my peers and media and what I saw in the movies, but also in a less overt way. I think it just had to do with witnessing and observing how my mom and my dad was always dieting too. So I think that's pretty much what it was. But it wasn't like my mom was like, go on a diet or anything like that. She, in fact, was very careful not to talk to me about that kind of stuff because she didn't want me to feel different or that pressured or anything like that. But what I often tell moms now is like, you don't have to say a single word, and your kids know if you are dieting. Kids know if you don't love your body, if they see, saying that, criticizing your body or other people's bodies, or if you see them dieting, or if you see them feeling angst about what they eat or don't eat. I think those things are very much observed by children, even at a very young age.
Yeah, I can actually attest to that because I feel like my dad would say stuff to me. I mean, he was always on a diet as well. And he would say stuff to me that, yeah, once again, never really overtly, hey, you should go on a diet, but like, oh, you should watch what you eat. It's very subtle and it's tricky. It's really tricky.
Yeah. It's not just, I tell stories all the time because I remember so much of this coming up for me where like I wrote a blog about how my uncle owned a candy store. And in Canada, when we went to visit, my brother, my cousin and we would go and I would like fill my bag up with stuff. And I remember one time I also went to go get ice cream there. And my grandfather snatched it out of my hand. He was like, "You're going overboard. This is crazy." And even though I was really young, I was only 11 or something, it was very shaming for me because, and I felt singled out because I didn't see my grandfather doing that to my cousin and my brother, who were certainly indulging. So I got that message like, you better watch it. Like, you can love food, but just don't love it too much and don't go overboard and don't, you know what I mean? So I became very self-conscious about outwardly showing my foodiness and my love of food, my favorite food. I felt like had to be squelched in certain ways. And part of what I do now is actually invite people to relish in and savor and have pleasure with food again, because there's nothing wrong with that, and I think a lot of people just end up not trusting themselves, which often can lead to disordered eating, because if you're not trusting your body and you're not trusting your appetite, or you're ignoring it for that matter, your body responds by being in a stress response and possibly even making you hungrier because you're giving your body mixed signals. You're not sort of honoring the cues and listening deeply and communicating. You're sort of making your body wrong,
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of us have felt so much guilt and shame around food, either growing up or currently. I mean, we live in such a diet culture that people talk about food comas and, eating all of that food and things like that. And what's your take on that guilt? I mean, it's horrible and it's like paralyzing,
It is. And I'm so impassioned about this topic because I think it's at the root of so much of how we approach food and how we don't allow ourselves to experience pleasure. And even if we do, it's tinged with guilt and conflict and nuances of emotions that prevent us from fully dropping into our bodies and using all of our senses and really giving ourselves permission to enjoy it. Because I think when we shame people for eating certain foods, or we have this morality around food, like this Twinkie is terrible, it just robbed a bank, it's a terrible thing, or is like Mother Teresa. Like if we attribute that morality to ourselves, or let's say I love Twinkies, but I've heard my whole life how it's toxic and poisonous and will make me fat and it's terrible and it's all processed. And if I hear that over and over and over again, and yet I still want a Twinkie, then I have a big conflict, because what I'm doing essentially is eating something that I've been taught my whole life is bad for you and even poisonous. What does it actually mean if I actually like it? Does that mean that there's something wrong with me, right? And we know that that's not true. We know that human beings are, we're hardwired to seek pleasure and avoid pain. And at the same time, we're one of the only species on this earth that can truly enjoy and savor and find pleasure with food, right? So it's not that I advocate for Twinkies, like Twinkies for all. No, it's not like that. It's not that I'm advocating for any one kind of diet. Of course, I want people to be healthy and balanced and have macronutrient balance. But I do think that we need to stop shaming people and moralizing food, because I think it adds to our fear of food, and it adds to us having this constant yo-yo dieting culture where we say, no, I'm not having Twinkies, I'm not having sugar ever again, right? Or no carbs, or all these food rules, these random food rules. And then with enough restriction and enough, preventing ourselves using willpower and clenched fists, over time, eventually we're going to ricochet the other direction. And that might be the very food we end up binging on because we've restricted it for so long, right? So I think in some ways, what I often do is take an abundance mindset with food where any and all foods are on the table. And then you get a better chance at deciding which foods for you light you up, give you pleasure, make you thrive, give you energy, which ones you're sensitive to, which ones you don't like. And I think that's way more empowering than just constantly outsourcing our nutrition to all these people, other people who have all kinds of theories that sometimes are right, sometimes are wrong, sometimes are discounted, but I think fuel our confusion and fear about what to eat and when to eat. So I don't have a solution for it, except that the work I'm doing is helping people shed and divorce themselves of that morality around food.
I know we moralize food. We attach a good, a bad to the Twinkie, the broccoli. How would you suggest that we not moralize food? Does that make sense? How do we separate those? Because it's so easy to internalize those things. How do we do that in our speech? How do we do that as we talk to our children? I'm curious because I have a daughter and she is 3 and I know she's watching me.
Yeah, I mean, and there's no easy answers here, but I have 3 daughters myself, and I've always been very hyper vigilant about like saying the right message and doing it. So that's part of the reason why I gave up dieting in the first place, because I didn't want them seeing me eating like this sad little TV dinner while they were eating like a whole beautiful home cooked meal. And saying, Mommy, why are you eating that? Oh, it's because Mommy doesn't love herself. It's because Mommy's sad. Mommy wants,
Right.
What was it say to that? Oh, I just love eating this like dog food. Yeah, I know.
Oh,
no, that's what it looks like.
Yeah,
and that's what it's like. So,
exactly.
So I decided for myself, like, I can't do that anymore. And I just need to not diet, not obsess about food, not obsess about my body, and really focus on how powerful your body can be and what you can actually do with your body. And when I was able to make that shift, I felt that they could observe that. They could observe me doing kettlebells or trying to do a headstand or running with them or whatever it is. And then with respect to the food piece, it's difficult because we're a family unit. So it's not just me driving these decisions, but I try with them not to make decisions for them about their food. Like if my daughter will say, like, how many cookies can I have? I'm very wary to be like, we'll have 2 cookies, because who am I to say that for them? I want them to trust themselves, and I want them to understand that they have the efficacy to know exactly how much to have and when to stop. And if I tell them that, then they're going to start relying on other voices to tell them what to do with their bodies, whether it's food or anything else. And what I most want is them to really trust in their signals, their body signals of hunger, to let them know that it's okay to enjoy certain foods and have cookies, and that I trust them to know how much is enough for them. And that there's not, like, food is just energy that has different consequences on our bodies. And if we can see it that way, then that immediately takes away the negative energy surrounding that food. I mean, this is a lot more of like advocacy and policy, but it drives me nuts when I see like the Skinnylicious meal or the guilt-free, like at Trader Joe's, they have like guilt-free mac and cheese. And that just sets up a tone where we start to question like, oh, well, if I have regular mac and cheese, is that bad? Like, should I never, ever have that? So like, I think messaging has to be, addressed in our food manufacturing and in food companies need to really understand how that messaging can actually harm people and make people more fearful about how they eat in general, you know? And I do understand like people do need guidance to know how to eat healthy because it's not foundational anymore. Like if we lived 100 years ago, we would, be harvesting our own food and there were small farms and it wasn't like massive processed and manufactured goods, right? It was like very natural. So we didn't need to teach people how to make sure they get enough fat, for instance, or how to get enough protein. But now we do need to help people navigate those murky waters because you can show up at the bank and there's going to be free lollipops. You can show up at Starbucks and have samples. And we don't know. We're so afraid of this underlying message that whatever you do, don't get fat, right? That's the message that I got very early. And if that's your underlying foundation, you're going to have a really hard time not being scared about your choices because of the potential consequences. But I found, and this may be part of the answer here, is when I was able to really slow down and not eat when I'm in any kind of stress response, but really when I'm able to get myself into a relaxation response while eating and to eat mindfully, my body automatically, it's quite amazing, just knows exactly how much to eat, when to stop. If I'm eating things that are not, let's say, not as healthy for me, I automatically, without even really thinking or being conscious of it, hit the brakes because I don't like the way my body feels, right? And then I instinctively say, I just want more broccoli, or I'm dying for some lentil stew, right? Or whatever it is. And I think every person is capable of this. We just need to, part of what I do is help people to return back home and to understand there's so much wisdom there. If they only can slow down, tap into it, be mindful and intentional, and to understand how our culture makes it very difficult for us to do this on our own. I don't know if that answers your question, but I hope so.
Yeah, it did. I like the idea of just kind of removing that, even in my own when I speak to her. And then I love the fact that you would do stuff that was healthy in front of her, to your kids, doing kettlebells or doing a headstand, and I like the idea of like my daughter seeing me going to work out or working out together as a family or going on a walk. You can also be an example in the positive way too, and I like that.
Absolutely. Role modeling is one of the best ways that children can learn, honestly. And they're very, very observant of their moms in particular. This is how they help navigate their world in a lot of ways. And so I'm very cognizant of the fact that my job isn't to tell them what to eat. My job is to provide healthy food, make it sure it's in their environment. And the more that it's there for them to take as easily as possible, the more chance they are going to eat that, right? So it's really a paradigm shift. Instead of being like, oh no, that's too much sugar, or that's not good for you, or don't eat that. It's instead of like, I'll make sure that there's lots of fruits in the house and that like there are cut up peppers and hummus ready to go like in the kitchen, so that it's not even like, it's sort of like flooded in their environment. And I realize that that's my job, is to make sure that those foods are there and available and accessible, not to judge them for, of course they're going to love cookies. Of course they're going to want all these things because that's our DNA. That's in our DNA.
Yeah,
our
exactly.
Reward centers light up when we have fat, salt, or sugar. That's just a biology, those neurotransmitters get activated and we want more and more of it, right? But if we can balance it out with fruits and vegetables, with healthy fats, with lean proteins, then they're getting what their bodies need to thrive and grow. And same for me or for anybody. But it's also like, and then there's room for all these other things too. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I like that mindset and the abundance mindset, because you can have the best types of food. You can have that croissant. I love croissants. I'm just going to put it out there. But you're not eating croissants all the time. I like being able to make that choice for yourself, and then hopefully your family seeing what the choices that you're making. So tell me, how does a coaching session for mindful eating work? So when you meet with a client, how do you go about helping them understand what's going on, how they're dealing with food, and maybe trying to start helping them down that path of being very aware of what they're eating, but then also not feeling guilty about it and enjoying it?
Yeah, so it's such a good question. And my work, so some people call me like a food therapist because a lot of it is what I do is a hybrid between coaching and therapy, really. So what I do is often I work long term with people. So there are people who I have as clients for 2+ years. I have one client who I've had for 3 years. And for those who want to commit to shorter term things is very different than somebody who signs on for like a year or whatever. So if I have like a shorter term client, like maybe 3 months, I'll start by, really understanding who they are as an eater, what triggers them, what foods trigger them, when they tend to get hungry, what are their stories around food, what is their family history around food, who else in their family dieted or didn't diet. I'll get all of that information. And then I have like a step-by-step system that I can really help bring about more groundedness around the eating experience. I do mindful eating exercises right there in the session with them. I have an exercise that helps people determine between fullness and satiety, which is really cool because there's a difference there. You could be like full of water or carrots, but still want something else to eat because you're not satisfied. And you can also be just full body satisfaction where you can push yourself away from the dinner table or the meal and not even think about food for hours, right? And if you can learn those techniques, if you can learn which foods do that for you, as well as to really slow down and understand the mechanisms between the underlying why you feel like eating in that moment, right? So what is it, a hunger? Is it a physical hunger? Is there an emotional hunger? Are you stressed? Are you bored? Are you eating because it's just there? So I kind of delve into all of that stuff too, so that people can understand, oh, okay, this is familiar to me. Every time I sit down to watch the game with my husband, I go grab ice cream, right? So we can follow the food script and understand where it comes from, why it's there, why you're following it, and if there's a better path, right? So that's more for the longer term, is understanding someone's food scripts and if they serve you any longer, if they don't, and how to get into, like, I call it heart-centered behavioral change. So it's like changing habits and food scripts, but in this really like slow, gentle, and compassionate way, as opposed to like, boot camp way, like punch your fists and have the willpower and have the discipline. Because I think that works and it's motivating short term, but it doesn't work long term.
Yeah, I always
throw you under the bus eventually.
I know, it's true. I'm always like, oh, that didn't last very long. Sheesh, and then you think I'm a weakling and I can't do it. And then, yep, you go the other direction and start eating all the food.
Exactly. And that's exactly it. Like if you're treating it so much like a success or failure and so all or nothing, I call it black and white. I call it 50 Shades of Gray of dieting because it's like we have to go from this extreme of like restricting and saying no and no and no, and then ricocheting the other direction where you're binging on that food. There has to be this 50 Shades of Gray, this middle area. And that's what I specialize in, is helping people move more towards the middle so that they're not defining their worth and their identity around success and failure with food, because it doesn't actually help. It just keeps us fear-based. And I'm much more about bringing inquiry and curiosity to our decisions around food as opposed to blaming and shaming.
What does the term embodiment have to do with like your practice, and how do you incorporate that into how you work and teach others?
Yeah, so embodiment's a huge piece of it. Essentially, my book is about body image, and it's oftentimes the precursor to feeling empowered with food, is to first be able to embody your body. So what I mean by that is really, a lot of us are kind of living up here in our heads. We're constantly distracted. We're on the go. We're sort of just on autopilot. And we don't take the time to drop into our bodies and get the lay of the land. How is it feeling? Where is there discomfort? How is this food? How am I experiencing this food? Rather than just being in our head about, ooh, I shouldn't be eating this food, or like I'm eating too much of this food. Instead, if you can embody and drop into your body and agree to be in your body through the good and the bad, there's so much wisdom and learning that can happen from that place, including tapping into that intrinsic wisdom about how to nourish yourself, just like a lion would do in the wild. Like you don't see a lion being like, should I have the wild boar today? Or should I have that? They're not like ruminating, like freaking out about what they're eating. They're just literally eating and that's it. And then they move on. But human beings can actually do that too. Like if you think about, Winter, like your 3-year-old, when she was a baby, I'm sure you would feed her. And when she was done, she'd like turn her head or she'd throw food on the floor.
Yep.
She'd let you know that she was done.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
And we're the ones who feel anxious, like, oh, are you sure? Like maybe you want more, maybe you need more. And the truth is that we all have this ability. We just have lost it because of the noise and the muck and the confusion and all the dietary protocols and all the things that the messages that we get have sort of put layer upon layer of confusion onto us. And when we can strip away and unpack that and get back into that wisdom, there's so much of healing can happen around your relationship with food and with body. But it has to start with actually agreeing to be in your body, not just to be in your head. And a lot of us are afraid to do that because we're conflicted about the way our body looks or the way our body feels. We don't want to feel discomfort. We don't want to feel challenged in any way emotionally. But oftentimes when I see people really processing and digesting emotions that come up, or even emotions from the past, and can have them come up and out by staying still. Like a lot of us numb out to feelings through food or through other activities, or we ignore it. We just don't even want to process it. And what that can do is actually can manifest on our bodies. Trauma can manifest on our bodies, and stress manifests on our bodies. So part of what I do is embodiment, to not just embody when you feel amazing, but actually embody when you feel conflicted or uncomfortable or pain physically or emotionally. And when we do that, we can let it dissipate and come out, up and out, as opposed to squelching it in. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it totally reminds me of Brene Brown, actually, about the whole shame cycle and everything. So, but yeah, letting it go, letting it come into the light, and not letting it totally defeat you. Now, I know that we're short on time. And so I wanted to ask if you had, I know this is not an easy task to just automatically go into a healthy eating mindset. Is there anything that you tell your clients, those people that you coach, any tips on helping them get into a right spot? Like anything that will rescue them from being in a downward spiral? Does that make sense? Like, do you tell them to take a deep breath, or do you go tell them is there anything that you give them as a quick tip of like, this might help you stop where you're at?
Yeah, there's a couple things. I have a technique that I call stop, look, and listen. When you were a kid, you'd well, my mom used to be like, before you cross the street, you got to look, stop, look, and listen. So I apply that messaging before I eat. Like before I take a grab for anything, I literally just stop. And it gives me a chance to, if I'm in a stress response, let my prefrontal cortex come in and have a say. So I look around, like, what just happened? Are the kids fighting? Was I just in a traffic jam? Am I upset about something going on in the world? Am I premenstrual? Like, what's happening, right? Looking around and noticing what's happening in the environment that may be dictating why you're choosing that food. And then listen. So it's like, okay, is this physical hunger? How do I know it's physical hunger? Oh, my stomach's growling. Okay, I'm really hungry. This is what I need right now. As opposed to, oh, no, I'm just eating because I'm stressed because the kids are fighting. Okay, and what else can I do instead, right? Because oftentimes we are very much like stimuli response. So as soon as we have something happen, like a stressor, we take immediate steps to alleviate that stress. And oftentimes it's based on things that we learned many, many years ago that we keep reliving over and over. So the stop, look, and listen approach gives you a chance to move from your primitive brain to the more executive functioning part of your brain. And then the other takeaway, what I would say is, a lot of it is really about turning off your amygdala, which is like your smoke detector, especially if you're in like a crisis kind of thing. Like your amygdala is what alerts your reptilian brain to act. So like if you were, God forbid, being chased by a saber-toothed tiger, everything would move from your digestive, from your core to your extremities into your brain, so you could act fast and move. And that your amygdala is what alerts your brain to do that. So if you can shut off the amygdala and let the prefrontal cortex have a say, then you're much more likely to make more rational choices that affect your long-term health instead of just that short-term decision, right? So the 4-7-8 technique is a breathing technique that really helps to activate the relaxation response. And it's very easy. You just have to breathe in through your nose for 4, hold it for a count of 7, and breathe out through your mouth for a count of 8. And you do that 4 times. And that is often enough to help signal your brain to know that there's no crisis occurring and that you can actually calm everything down and make more rational decisions.
Ooh, I am going to try that because I sometimes am not rational when I make decisions. Well, Jenny, that is super helpful. Just those tips. I think I'm going to actually try using them in my mindful eating journey. We really appreciate you being on the podcast today. Fun to talk about what you do and all of the things that we struggle with and how you help people overcome those. Now, where can people find you, Jenny?
The best place to find me is my website, which is www.jennyedencoaching.com. And I also have a Facebook group called Wellness Warriors, and I'd love to invite you guys and your audience, anybody who's listening, to join. You just have to go out to the URL, the search bar, and type in Wellness Warriors support group. And it's a wonderful community of people, like-minded people, really, who love food, who love cooking, recipes, mindfulness, wellness, body image stuff. We do it all in there.
Perfect. I'll put a link in the show notes, our listeners, so that you can find that as well. Now, Jenny, I think you're offering something to our listeners as well. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So if anybody who's been listening and is like, I want to try this mindful eating thing, I don't even know where to get started. All you need to do is go to bit.ly/7dayslow. And I think, Winter, you'll put it in the show notes.
Maybe? Yes, for sure.
And it's a 7-day mini course on mindful eating. So it gives you very specific and actionable steps that you can take right away to adopt some of these strategies and techniques into your life.
Perfect. We so appreciate that. I'm going to, like I said, put those in all of those links in the show notes so you guys can access that. Jenny, thank you so much for chatting with us about mindful eating, that and kind of the psychology of food. And
it was really enlightening. I loved
those things that kind of, like I said, kind of are hurdles for us. So thank you again. We really, really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. I had a lot of fun talking to you guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Isn't that great, you guys? That was really interesting to realize how much that diet culture is really affecting us.
Yes, in so many ways.
Yes, but I really appreciated all that Jenny had to say about how we can be a little bit more aware or in tune with what we're doing and saying, even not even just the eating part, but doing and saying, so that we can have a little bit more peace with food
and freedom.
Yeah, with our food. Anyway, we enjoyed that interview, and we hope you did too.
Introducing interesting ingredients.
Sharon, you have that this week.
I do.
Okay, what are you talking about?
So I'm talking about a wine, and I don't do this very often.
Okay.
I occasionally drink, as most of you know, but I made a bolognese sauce, spaghetti bolognese, this week. And it calls for either beef stock or a dry red wine, so not sweet red wine. So you can do either of these. Now, I've done it with beef stock, and it works out really well because it also calls for bouillon. And so I use like the Better Than Bouillon jar, and I do a couple scoops in there. Yeah.
That's really great, by the way.
I love that stuff.
In itself.
I was going to talk about that.
Oh, really? Okay.
But it's the combination of the Better Than Bouillon and this red wine that I used made for some amazing sauce.
Really?
Yeah. And I called dibs on the leftovers.
You're like, hands off.
Yeah. And usually the boys will just eat it or something. But I'm like, no, I need these.
Sorry. Those are mine.
Yeah.
Okay. So it was a dry red wine. Yes, anything in particular or?
Yes, it was.
Okay.
It's called Apothic Brew. So Apothic is the winemaker. They have things like Apothic Crush and Apothic Dark. And they are a winemaker in Napa. And they're known for kind of their Gothic labeling and things
Whoa,
like that.
okay.
And red wine blends. So they don't just do like a straight Cabernet, for instance. They'll do a bunch of different types of blends to get like the perfect tasting wine.
Okay.
So this is called Apothic Brew, and they have one of their signature red wine blends that they mix with cold brew coffee, which sounds bizarre.
It sounds bizarre, and I don't think it would be good. I've never had wine before.
Fantastic.
What?
It's so good.
What?
It's so good. It's very drinkable just on its own. It's very good.
So is it coffee flavor? Like you feel like you
there is a little bit of caffeine in there.
Yeah, but and then do you have the coffee flavor? Does that come out a lot?
It doesn't come out a lot, but because cold brew coffee is a lot less acidic.
Oh, okay.
The refrigeration, the fact that it's sat, because to make it, it's got to kind of sit there for a while and chill for 12 to 24 hours.
Does it ever get hot water applied to it? No,
it can't. It depends on
how they do it. Okay.
So yeah, this cold brew coffee with the wine is delightful. So good. And you don't get harsh notes of coffee necessarily, but it does come through a little bit. And so it's just the right amount. I don't know how to explain it, but it was so darn good in the spaghetti sauce that I made.
So you put it together with the Better Than Bouillon.
Yeah. So I had like crushed tomatoes, some tomato paste, just a little bit. Then I had a couple of tablespoons of the Better Than Bouillon in there and half a cup of this Apothic Brew wine in there. And it was so good. So good.
Okay. Well,
it could be the best sauce that I've ever made.
Wow.
I'm not sure.
Wow. Okay.
Like it's up there.
Whoa. Well, do you have a recipe written somewhere?
It's from Recipe Tin Eats.
Oh, okay.
So from Nagi, it's her spaghetti bolognese.
Okay.
recipe.
Well, I'll put a link in the show notes for that. But then if you happen to, and she does require a red wine in that.
She's got some extensive notes in there, which I really like about her recipes. She does a lot of notes to provide you a little bit more education on each recipe.
Right.
But she says you can use either beef stock or the red wine. I've done it both ways. It's very good with the beef stock.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
It is very good. Just this Apothic Brew put it over the top for me.
Okay. Well, I'll put a link in the show notes for the recipe and then also a link to Apothic.
So we live in Utah.
Yes.
So our alcohol that we get in the state is pretty regulated. You have to buy like wine and things like that through DABC, which is the Department of Alcohol Beverage Control. So it's state liquor stores and things like that.
Yeah.
So you can't just actually buy this in Utah. You should be able to buy it pretty much anywhere else. So my friends and I ordered a case through the liquor store.
I was wondering.
I
was
had
like,
heard about this wine, and so we're like, I don't know if it's going to be good. So a few of us went in on it.
Yeah.
So we wouldn't be like,
if it was a bummer, then
then you would be
weren't
stuck with 12 bottles.
Yeah.
That might not be good.
So
yeah.
you ordered it. Okay. So
We
you might be able to get it other places in your state, and then also put a link in the show notes for Better Than Bouillon, because that
stuff is fantastic.
It's so nice. It's not your little cube of dried pressed powder.
No, they take roasted meats and things like that and use them in their bouillon base.
Yeah.
And roasted vegetables. It's really good.
It's a really nice bouillon. I think it has a little bit better flavor. So
way better.
Okay, well, cool.
Thanks for joining us today for our show. You can find us at hungrysquared.com, on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Play Music, and Spotify.
Hey, you guys. Thanks so much for hanging out with us. We've been having a lot of fun on Facebook and Instagram, so you can follow us there, like I mentioned before, at Hungry Squared, or on Instagram at Hungry Squared. Same thing, both places. And, tell your friends about our podcast, because we enjoy expanding our food nerdy community. food nerdy community. That's hard to say. There's too many R's in there or something. No, there's not that many R's. What am I talking about? The nerd part is really hard for me to say. Anyway, join us next week for our next episode of Food Nerdery.
I love you. Bye.
Bye.
Hungry squared, yeah, hungry squared.